What happens when a determined community leader and a fiery activist cross paths with a woman who sees their kindness as a nuisance? Reverend James's quiet strength and Maya's bold passion collide with Karen's attempts to disrupt their mission, but can unity and compassion prevail over prejudice? The warm rays of the afternoon sun bathed the bustling churchyard as volunteers moved with purpose, preparing for the Blackwell Baptist Church's annual charity event. It was a cherished tradition in the neighborhood, a day dedicated to helping families in need. Rows of tables overflowed with canned goods, fresh produce, school supplies, and even gently used clothing. A vibrant hum of activity filled the air, accompanied by the uplifting sounds of gospel music echoing from the small stage near the entrance. At the heart of the event stood Reverend James, the church's beloved leader. In his early 50s, Reverend James was a tall, charismatic man with a kind face and a voice that carried both authority and warmth. He moved through the crowd, greeting volunteers and guests alike, ensuring everyone felt welcome. Beside him was his daughter, Maya, a young woman in her late 20s with a fiery passion for community work. Her quick smile and energetic demeanor made her a natural leader, and she coordinated the volunteers with practiced efficiency. "Let's make sure the school supply kits are at the front table," Maya called out to a group of teenagers unloading boxes from a van. "We want families to have easy access to them." Nearby, a group of elderly women from the congregation sorted donated clothes, their laughter and chatter adding to the event's joyful atmosphere. A line of families stretched down the block, waiting patiently to receive the donations that would ease their burdens during tough times. "God bless you, Reverend," an older man said as he shook Reverend James's hand. "This event means the world to so many of us." Reverend James smiled warmly. "It's a blessing to serve," he replied. "We're all in this together." For the community, the charity event was more than just an opportunity to receive aid. It was a symbol of hope and solidarity. It brought people together, reminding them that they were not alone in their struggles. Every year, the event grew larger, drawing support not only from church members, but also from local businesses and individuals eager to contribute. However, not everyone saw the event in such a positive light. Just beyond the edge of the churchyard, in a pristine white house with a perfectly manicured lawn, Karen watched the scene with growing irritation. To Karen, the event was a nuisance. The sound of gospel music and the steady stream of cars driving down her quiet street disrupted her sense of order. She peered through her window, her lips pursed in disapproval as she muttered to herself about the chaos happening outside. "This is ridiculous," Karen said aloud, her voice tinged with indignation. "Blocking traffic, making noise. Why can't they do this somewhere else?" As the afternoon wore on, Karen's frustration boiled over. She decided she couldn't simply sit and watch anymore. This time she was going to take matters into her own hands. The buzz of the charity event continued as volunteers handed out food packages and supplies, the atmosphere filled with the sounds of laughter and gospel music. But just as the choir began a rendition of "Amazing Grace," the peaceful scene was interrupted. Karen stormed out of her house, her heels clicking sharply against the pavement as she marched toward the churchyard. Heads began to turn as Karen's voice rang out, sharp and accusing. "Excuse me," she called, her tone dripping with annoyance. "Who's in charge here?" Reverend James, who had been speaking to a group of volunteers, turned to face her. His calm demeanor remained intact as he approached her with his characteristic warmth. "Good afternoon, ma'am. I'm Reverend James. How can I help you?" Karen didn't return the pleasantry. Instead, she crossed her arms and looked around with a scowl. "This is completely unacceptable," she said, her voice rising. "The noise, the traffic, you're disrupting the entire neighborhood." Reverend James nodded thoughtfully. "I understand your concern. We've worked with the city to ensure all necessary permits are in place, and we've directed traffic to minimize inconvenience. If there's something specific bothering you, I'd be happy to address it." Karen scoffed. "Permits or not, this is a residential area. People shouldn't have to put up with this kind of chaos just because you want to play loud music and crowd the streets." Nearby, volunteers paused their work, exchanging uneasy glances. Maya stepped forward, her eyes narrowing as she approached her father and Karen. "With all due respect," Maya said firmly, "this isn't chaos. It's a community event helping people in need. The music and activity are a small price to pay for making a real difference." Karen's eyes flicked to Maya, her expression hardening. "I'm not saying charity isn't important," she said, her tone condescending. "But there are proper places for this kind of thing. Community centers, public parks. Not in a neighborhood where people are trying to live their lives." Maya opened her mouth to respond, but Reverend James placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Ma'am, I assure you, we've taken every step to ensure this event runs smoothly and respectfully. Our goal is to serve the community, not to disrupt it." Karen didn't seem to hear him. Instead, she pulled out her phone and began recording. "You think you can just do whatever you want because you're a church?" she said, raising her voice for the camera. "This is a violation of our rights as residents." Maya's jaw tightened, but she held back, not wanting to escalate the situation further. A few of the volunteers quietly began recording Karen's behavior as well, sensing that her tirade might become something more. Karen, emboldened by her own outrage, dialed 911. "I'd like to report a disturbance," she said into the phone, her voice dripping with drama. "There's an unauthorized event causing a public nuisance. It's completely out of control." The crowd fell silent as they realized what was happening. Parents ushered their children away from the commotion, and volunteers stood frozen, unsure of what to do next. Reverend James remained calm, his steady gaze never leaving Karen. When the police arrived, 2 officers stepped out of their cruiser and approached the scene. One of them, Officer Daniels, was a familiar face in the community. He greeted Reverend James with a nod before turning to Karen. "Ma'am, can you explain what the issue is?" Daniels asked. Karen launched into a tirade, waving her arms as she pointed at the churchyard. "They're causing a disturbance. The noise, the traffic. It's unbearable. They're breaking all kinds of regulations, and I want this shut down immediately." Officer Daniels glanced around. The event was orderly, the volunteers working efficiently, and the traffic under control. "Ma'am, this appears to be a peaceful charity event," he said. "They've followed all the necessary protocols. There's no reason to shut it down." Karen's face flushed red. "Are you kidding me? They're disturbing the peace. This is unacceptable." "Ma'am," Daniels said patiently, "there's nothing unlawful happening here. I suggest you let these people continue their work. They're doing something good for the community." Karen's frustration boiled over. "This is ridiculous," she shouted, glaring at the crowd. "You're all just enabling them." Maya, unable to hold back any longer, stepped forward. "You can record all you want, Karen," she said, her voice firm but controlled. "But you can't stop us from helping people. This isn't about noise or traffic. It's about you not wanting to see us succeed." Karen opened her mouth to retort, but was interrupted by the murmurs of agreement from the crowd. A young boy, no older than 10, stepped forward and spoke timidly. "The church helped my mom when we didn't have food," he said. "Why would you want to stop that?" The crowd grew quiet, the boy's words cutting through the tension like a knife. For the first time, Karen hesitated, her self-righteousness faltering under the weight of the child's innocence. But the moment of reflection didn't last long. Karen doubled down, muttering about people who don't follow the rules as she stormed away, her phone still recording. Reverend James sighed, watching her retreating figure. "Let's get back to work," he said softly. "We've got people to help." The crowd nodded, the tension easing as they returned to their tasks. But Karen's actions had set something in motion that couldn't be undone. As the charity event continued, Karen's frustration only deepened. Her encounter with the police hadn't gone the way she hoped, and the sight of the bustling churchyard just outside her window became unbearable. Sitting in her spotless living room, Karen scrolled through her phone, reading comments on the video she had posted earlier. The video, which she titled Out of Control Event Disrupting Neighborhood, had gained some attention, but not in the way she anticipated. Many viewers criticized her for harassing people trying to help their community. Comments like, "Seriously? They're feeding families in need, and you should be ashamed of yourself," filled the thread. But Karen wasn't ready to back down. She convinced herself that she was in the right and decided to escalate her efforts. She dialed the city's code enforcement office, hoping to find some technicality that would force the church to shut down the event. "This is Karen from Willow Avenue," she began, her tone clipped and formal. "I'm calling to report an unauthorized public event that's disrupting our neighborhood. They're blocking traffic, playing loud music, and creating a public nuisance. I demand an inspection immediately." The employee on the other end of the line assured her that the event had been properly permitted, but Karen refused to accept the answer. "Permitted or not," she snapped, "it's still unacceptable. I'll be filing a formal complaint." Feeling emboldened by her call, Karen returned to the churchyard. Her phone raised high as she began live streaming once again. She walked along the edge of the event, narrating loudly for her audience. "Here we are, folks," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "This so-called charity event has taken over our neighborhood, disrupting our peace and quiet. Look at this chaos." In the background, volunteers packed bags of food, children played near a bounce house, and gospel music filled the air. Her exaggerated claims about chaos seemed absurdly out of place. As she streamed, Maya spotted her from across the yard. Determined not to let Karen's antics derail their work, she approached with measured steps. "Karen," Maya said firmly, "you need to stop this. We're not doing anything wrong, and you know it." Karen turned her phone toward Maya, capturing her on the stream. "And here's one of the organizers now," she said smugly, "trying to silence me for standing up for what's right." "What's right?" Maya replied, her voice steady. "What's right is helping people in need. What's right is showing compassion and supporting your community. What you're doing is trying to tear us down for your own satisfaction." The live stream audience began to grow, with comments pouring in faster than Karen could read. Many sided with Maya, expressing their outrage at Karen's behavior. "This woman needs to mind her business. How can someone be so cruel? Karen is embarrassing herself." But Karen, ignoring the growing backlash online, decided to take her complaints to the next level. She pulled out her phone again, this time to call a local news station. "This is Karen Thompson," she announced, her voice laced with indignation. "There's a situation happening in my neighborhood that I think your viewers need to know about. A so-called charity event is causing massive disruption, and the authorities are doing nothing about it. Someone needs to hold these people accountable." The news station, intrigued by the call, sent a junior reporter to the scene. When the reporter arrived, Karen eagerly approached, recounting her grievances with theatrical flair. "It's been a nightmare," she declared. "The noise, the traffic, the disruption, it's completely out of control." The reporter, skeptical of Karen's claims, began interviewing other people at the event. Volunteers and community members painted a very different picture. One woman described how the church had provided groceries for her family during a particularly hard month. A local business owner explained how the church's events helped bring the community together. Even Officer Daniels, who had returned to patrol the area, spoke with the reporter. "This event is peaceful, well-organized, and fully permitted," he said. "There's no issue here other than one individual's complaints." Karen watched the interviews unfold with mounting frustration. She tried to interrupt, loudly insisting that her concerns were being ignored, but the reporter politely dismissed her. Meanwhile, Maya had her own plan. She uploaded the earlier video of Karen's tirade to the church's social media pages, accompanied by a heartfelt message about the purpose of the charity event. "This is what we're up against," the post read. "But we won't let hate or negativity stop us from helping those in need." The post quickly gained traction, with shares and comments pouring in from people across the community and beyond. Supportive messages flooded the church's inbox. "Keep doing the amazing work you're doing. Don't let this woman discourage you. We need more events like this in every neighborhood." As Karen's antics continued, her online presence became a magnet for criticism. The live stream she had started was now being shared widely, but not in the way she hoped. People condemned her behavior, dubbing her a classic Karen and calling out her blatant attempts to disrupt a positive event. By the end of the day, Karen's frustration reached a boiling point. She retreated to her home, slamming the door behind her and muttering angrily about being misunderstood. But outside, the church event carried on, stronger and more united than ever. Reverend James, watching the volunteers work tirelessly, couldn't help but feel a swell of pride. The community had rallied together in the face of adversity, proving that compassion and determination could overcome even the loudest voices of negativity. By the next morning, Karen's actions had sparked a wave of reactions that reverberated far beyond the neighborhood. The video Maya had posted of Karen's tirade gained significant attention, reaching thousands of viewers within hours. Comments poured in, with people from all walks of life sharing their outrage and support for the church's charity event. "This is heartbreaking," one commenter wrote. "How can anyone try to stop something so positive?" Another said, "Thank you, Reverend James and Maya, for standing strong. Don't let her ignorance stop your amazing work." As the churchyard bustled with volunteers the following day, a sense of renewed energy filled the air. People who hadn't initially planned to participate showed up to lend a hand after seeing the video online. Some brought donations, while others offered their time, eager to contribute to the cause. Maya stood at the entrance, greeting each new arrival with a warm smile. "Thank you for coming," she said repeatedly, her heart swelling with gratitude. One volunteer, a middle-aged man named Carlos, approached her with bags of groceries. "I wasn't planning to come, but after seeing that woman's behavior, I had to do something," he explained. "You all are doing God's work, and it's important to support that." Inside, Reverend James addressed a group of volunteers who had gathered for a quick meeting. "We've faced challenges before, and we'll face them again," he said, his calm voice resonating with strength. "But this is proof that when we stand together, no obstacle is too great. Let's keep our focus on what matters, helping those in need." Meanwhile, Karen's video continued to backfire spectacularly. The footage of her yelling at volunteers and dismissing the church's work had gone viral, with hashtags like "Each Karen Strikes Again" and "Support the Church" trending on social media. Even local news outlets began covering the story, interviewing members of the community who spoke passionately about the event's impact. One of the most powerful interviews came from a young boy named Marcus. Standing beside his mother, he spoke with quiet confidence as he recounted how the church had helped his family. "When my dad lost his job, we didn't have enough money for food," he said. "The church gave us groceries and made sure we were okay. They care about people, and I think that's really special." The interview was shared widely, touching hearts and further solidifying public support for the church. Karen, however, remained defiant. She posted a long rant on social media, claiming she was the victim of online harassment and accusing the church of orchestrating a smear campaign against her. But her attempts to garner sympathy fell flat. Instead of rallying behind her, people called her out for her behavior. "Maybe you should reflect on why so many people disagree with you," one commenter wrote. As the backlash against Karen grew, her actions also spurred meaningful conversations within the neighborhood. At a town hall meeting organized by the church, residents gathered to discuss the importance of community solidarity and addressing prejudice. "Karen's actions were a symptom of a bigger problem," Maya said, addressing the crowd. "We can't let ignorance divide us. This event isn't just about charity. It's about coming together to support each other, no matter our differences." Her words resonated deeply, sparking applause from the audience. Even those who had been hesitant to get involved now felt compelled to take a stand. A local business owner offered to sponsor the next charity event, while a group of high school students volunteered to create promotional materials to raise awareness. Karen's own neighbors began distancing themselves from her, with some even speaking out against her behavior. "I've lived next to Karen for years, and I've always thought she was a little uptight," said one woman, shaking her head. "But this was too much." Through it all, Reverend James remained steadfast in his mission. He continued to lead with grace and humility, refusing to let Karen's actions overshadow the purpose of the event. "Hate and anger may be loud," he said during a sermon that Sunday, "but love and compassion are louder. We must let our actions speak for us." By the end of the week, the charity event had exceeded its goals. The church had collected more donations than ever before, and the sense of unity among the community had never been stronger. For Maya, the experience was both exhausting and inspiring. As she helped pack up the remaining supplies, she reflected on how much good had come from such an ugly incident. "It's funny," she said to one of the volunteers. "Karen thought she could tear us down, but all she did was bring us closer together." The aftermath of Karen's actions unfolded quickly, and the consequences of her outburst soon became unavoidable. The video of her tirade at the church charity event continued to circulate online, amassing hundreds of thousands of views. Major news outlets picked up the story, and Karen's name became synonymous with entitlement and ignorance. At first, Karen tried to defend herself. She posted on social media, claiming that her intentions were misunderstood and that she had simply been trying to preserve the peace of the neighborhood. "I'm not against charity," she wrote in one post, "but there are rules for a reason. No one seems to care about how disruptive this event was for the people who actually live here." The response to her post was swift and overwhelmingly negative. Comments poured in, accusing her of being self-centered and insensitive. Disruptive? They were feeding families in need. This isn't about rules. It's about your prejudice. Karen, maybe reflect on why everyone's upset instead of doubling down. Even Karen's employer caught wind of the controversy. She worked as a customer service manager for a local retail company, and the viral video was soon brought to the attention of her HR department. Concerned about the backlash affecting their brand, the company placed Karen on administrative leave pending an investigation. When Karen received the call from HR, she was stunned. "You can't punish me for something I did outside of work," she argued, her voice rising with frustration. But the representative on the other end remained firm. "Your behavior reflects poorly on the company, and we have to take this seriously," they explained. Karen's neighbors, too, began to distance themselves from her. Those who had once exchanged polite greetings on the sidewalk now avoided eye contact. At the local grocery store, whispers followed her down the aisles. It was clear that her actions had left a lasting impression, and not a good one. One particularly painful moment came when a group of neighborhood parents decided to organize a letter of support for the church. They signed a petition condemning Karen's behavior and expressing their solidarity with Reverend James and his congregation. Copies of the letter were posted on community bulletin boards and shared online, further isolating Karen from the people around her. For the first time, Karen began to feel the weight of her actions. The community's rejection was a stark contrast to the authority and influence she had once believed she wielded. Her initial defiance gave way to confusion, frustration, and eventually, regret. Meanwhile, the church remained steadfast in its mission. Reverend James continued to lead with grace, refusing to let Karen's actions define the narrative. "We don't hold grudges," he said during a Sunday sermon. "But we do believe in accountability. It's through facing our mistakes that we grow." As Karen's situation worsened, she found herself reflecting on Reverend James's words. She had intended to shut down the event out of a sense of entitlement, but instead, She had exposed her own prejudice and pettiness for the world to see. Slowly, the realization began to sink in. She had been wrong. Karen spent several days in isolation, avoiding social media and public spaces. The silence was deafening, but it forced her to confront the truth she had been running from. She started replaying the events in her mind, the way she had dismissed Maya, the child's heartfelt words about the church's help, and the quiet strength with which Reverend James had handled her outburst. Finally, after much internal struggle, Karen decided to take the first step toward making amends. She reached out to the church, leaving a message with the secretary. "I'd like to meet with Reverend James," she said hesitantly. "I need to apologize." The secretary relayed the message, and Reverend James agreed to meet with Karen. When she arrived at the church office, her usual air of confidence was gone. She looked nervous, her hands fidgeting as she sat across from Reverend James and Maya. "I don't know where to start," Karen began, her voice trembling. "I was wrong. I judged you unfairly, and I let my own biases get in the way of seeing the good you're doing. I'm sorry." Reverend James regarded her with a calm expression. "Apologies are a good start," he said gently, "but real change comes from action. Are you willing to reflect on what brought you to that moment and do the work to grow from it?" Karen nodded slowly. "Yes," she said. "I want to do better." Maya, still wary, spoke up. "It's not just about saying the right words, Karen. People were hurt by what you did. If you're serious about changing, you need to show it." Karen met Maya's gaze and nodded again. "I understand. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right." The charity event at Blackwell Baptist Church continued to thrive despite Karen's disruptive actions. In fact, her attempt to shut it down had inadvertently brought the community closer together and amplified the event's purpose. The viral video of Karen's outburst had drawn attention not just from locals, but also from nearby towns. Donations poured in: clothing, canned goods, school supplies, and even monetary contributions from people moved by the church's mission. Reverend James stood at the center of the churchyard on the final day of the event, surveying the bustling activity with a sense of pride and gratitude. Rows of volunteers worked tirelessly, sorting supplies and assisting families in need. Children played near the bounce house, their laughter blending with the cheerful chatter of adults and the uplifting strains of gospel music. "It's amazing," Maya said as she approached her father, a clipboard in hand. "We've received almost double the donations compared to last year. We might even be able to extend the outreach program into the next few months." Reverend James smiled warmly. "God works in mysterious ways," he said. "Sometimes, what begins as a challenge ends up becoming a blessing." The increased support allowed the church to expand its efforts. In addition to distributing food and supplies, they began offering free tutoring services, career counseling, and workshops on financial literacy. Families who had struggled in silence now had access to resources that could help them rebuild their lives. The community's response was overwhelming. Local businesses partnered with the church, offering discounts, free services, and even job opportunities to those in need. A nearby grocery store donated fresh produce, while a local tech company provided refurbished laptops for students. One of the most heartwarming moments came when a single mother named Rachel stepped forward to share her story during a volunteer meeting. "A few years ago, I was in a really dark place," she began, her voice trembling with emotion. "I couldn't afford to feed my kids, and I didn't know where to turn. This church helped me when I needed it most. Now I'm here today, volunteering, because I want to give back what they gave me, a chance to hope again." The room erupted in applause, and Rachel's story became a symbol of what the charity event was truly about. Not just providing immediate assistance, but empowering people to rise above their struggles and thrive. Meanwhile, Karen's actions continued to spark conversations about prejudice and privilege within the neighborhood. The church used the incident as an opportunity to host a series of community dialogues, inviting residents to discuss issues of bias, empathy, and the importance of standing together. During one such meeting, Reverend James addressed the crowd with his signature calm authority. "What happened here wasn't just about one person," he said. "It was about the values we hold as a community. Do we choose division or unity? Do we let fear guide us, or do we lead with love?" His words resonated deeply, and many attendees left the meeting feeling inspired to take action. Some signed up to volunteer at the church, while others pledged to challenge their own biases and work toward a more inclusive community. Even Karen, who had begun her journey toward redemption, found herself reflecting on the church's message. She hesitantly attended one of the community dialogues, sitting quietly in the back and listening as people shared their experiences. Though she felt out of place, she couldn't deny the impact of the stories she heard. One speaker, an elderly man named Mr. Thompson, shared a powerful testimony. "When I was younger, I faced discrimination that tried to break me," he said. "But the people who stood by me, who showed me kindness, they're the reason I'm here today. We all have the power to lift each other up. We just have to choose to use it." Karen wiped away a tear as his words sank in. Slowly but surely, the walls she had built around herself began to crumble. As the charity event wrapped up, the churchyard buzzed with celebration. Volunteers gathered to share a meal, their laughter and joy filling the space that had once been the site of tension and conflict. Reverend James stood to address the crowd, his voice carrying over the chatter. "This event wasn't just about what we gave, it was about what we gained," he said. "We gained understanding, strength, and a renewed sense of purpose. Each of you made this possible, and I am deeply grateful." The crowd erupted in cheers and applause, their unity a testament to the power of compassion and resilience. In the days that followed, the church became a beacon of hope for the community. Samuel's story and the charity event's success inspired similar initiatives in neighboring towns. Other churches and organizations reached out to Reverend James and Maya for guidance, eager to replicate their model of community support. Began volunteering at the church, initially hesitant, but gradually finding her place among the volunteers. Though many remained skeptical of her motives, Karen's consistent efforts to contribute and learn began to earn her cautious respect. For Maya, the event was a turning point. "This is what it's all about," she said to her father as they packed up the last of the supplies. "Turning pain into purpose, turning division into unity." Reverend James nodded, his gaze sweeping over the emptying churchyard. "And reminding everyone," he said, "that no matter how dark things may seem, there's always a light waiting to shine." Karen stood outside the church, clutching a box of donated supplies as a group of volunteers walked past her. She had spent several days wrestling with the shame and regret over her actions, replaying the confrontation in her mind. The echoes of her angry words and the innocent voices of those she had tried to silence haunted her thoughts. Now she was back, not to defend herself, but to make amends. At first, her presence caused murmurs among the volunteers. Some whispered, "What is she doing here?" while others gave her wary glances. Karen couldn't blame them. She had gone from being the neighborhood antagonist to standing awkwardly in the very space she had tried to dismantle. Maya spotted her from across the yard, her expression guarded. "Karen," she said as she approached, arms crossed. "What brings you here?" Karen swallowed hard, her usual confidence replaced by a mix of vulnerability and determination. "I came to help," she said softly. "And to apologize to everyone." Maya raised an eyebrow, skeptical. "Why now?" Karen took a deep breath. "Because I was wrong. I was blinded by my own assumptions and biases. and I let them dictate my actions. Seeing how this church has brought people together, how it's changed lives, it made me realize how small and petty I was being. I want to do better. Maya studied her for a moment, searching for any sign of insincerity. Words are one thing, she said finally. Actions are another. If you're serious about this, you'll need to prove it. Karen nodded. I understand. I'm ready to work. Reverend James, who had been watching the interaction from nearby, stepped forward with his characteristic calm. Everyone deserves a chance to grow, he said gently. Karen, if you're willing to contribute with an open heart, we welcome your help. Karen's relief was evident as she joined the volunteers. Her first task was unloading boxes of supplies, a simple but humbling activity. She worked quietly, listening to the conversations around her and observing the camaraderie of the group. It wasn't long before she realized how much effort went into organizing and executing events like these. Over the following weeks, Karen continued to volunteer, showing up early to help set up and staying late to clean up. She attended community meetings, often sitting silently in the back, absorbing the discussions about unity and understanding. Slowly, her interactions with the other volunteers became more comfortable. One day, as she packed food bags alongside Maya, she finally broke the silence. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, Karen said, her voice low. But I hope in time I can earn your trust. Maya paused, then gave a small nod. It's a start, she said. Karen also began reflecting on her own biases through conversations with Reverend James. During one such discussion, she admitted, I thought I was standing up for what was right, but I see now that I was just clinging to my own privilege. I'm sorry for the harm I caused. Reverend James smiled gently. Acknowledging our mistakes is the first step toward change. Keep walking this path, and you'll find redemption. Over time, Karen's efforts began to speak louder than her past actions. Though some members of the community remained skeptical, many appreciated her willingness to own her mistakes and work toward making amends. By the end of the season, Karen had become a regular presence at the church, her transformation serving as a reminder that change was possible for anyone willing to face their flaws and grow. The season ended with a sense of fulfillment that rippled through the community. Blackwell Baptist Church stood as a beacon of resilience, its charity event not only exceeding expectations, but leaving a lasting impression on everyone involved. It was a testament to the power of unity, compassion, and the willingness to overcome division. The churchyard was quieter now, with the last of the supplies packed away and volunteers exchanging hugs and farewells. Reverend James and Maya stood near the stage, reflecting on the journey they had just completed. Do you think we made a difference? Maya asked, her voice tinged with exhaustion but also pride. Reverend James smiled, his eyes scanning the space where so many lives had intersected over the past few weeks. We did more than make a difference, he said. We planted seeds of kindness, understanding, and change. They'll grow long after today. Among those seeds of change was Karen, who lingered at the edge of the yard, unsure whether to approach. Gathering her courage, she stepped forward, her once defiant posture now replaced by humility. Reverend, Karen began, her voice steady but soft, I just wanted to thank you for giving me the chance to be a part of this, for not giving up on me. Reverend James met her gaze with his characteristic warmth. It's never too late to choose a better path, he said. You've taken the first steps, Karen. Keep walking it and you'll continue to grow. Karen nodded, her expression one of gratitude. I will, she promised. The final gathering of the season was the end-of-year community meeting held in the church auditorium. The room was filled with people from all walks of life, volunteers, families who had been helped by the church, and new faces inspired by the charity event's success. Reverend James stood at the podium, his voice resonating with purpose. "This year has taught us many things," he began. "It's taught us that compassion can bridge divides, that strength comes from unity, and that even when faced with resistance, the light of kindness cannot be dimmed." He paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. "We've seen growth in unexpected places. People who once stood on opposite sides are now working together. That is the power of change, the kind of change we need not just in our community, but in the world." The audience erupted into applause, many rising to their feet in a standing ovation. Maya, standing near the back, felt a swell of pride. The journey had been challenging, but the rewards were undeniable. Among the crowd, Dylan, the young boy who had shared his story, sat with his mother. He looked up at her and said, "I want to help next year too. I want to be like them." Karen sat quietly, her hands clasped, absorbing every word. For the first time in a long time, she felt hope, not just for herself, but for the community she had once tried to disrupt. As the meeting concluded, Reverend James offered one final thought. Change doesn't happen overnight, but it starts with a choice to see each other not as obstacles, but as allies. If we can do that, there's no limit to what we can achieve together. The room filled with applause once more, and as the crowd dispersed, the sense of connection lingered. Blackwell Baptist Church had not just hosted a charity event, it had fostered a movement, one rooted in respect, empathy, and the belief that even the smallest acts of kindness could create ripples of transformation.